we're going to start things off on the morning show, as we usually do, with the week that was. Let's take a look at a few stories that made headlines across the globe this week. And we're going to kick off the show with the news that scientists and former political leaders want the United Nations climate talks process to be reformed. In a letter written as the latest conference of the parties takes place in Baku, Azerbaijan, the group argues that the host nation should be fully committed to the phasing out of fossil fuels. The Azerbaijani president this week called oil a gift from God, while organizing officials have sought to arrange business deals. Another recommendation is for smaller, more frequent meetings, which could better address the fast-changing climate crisis.
It has landed in an atmosphere of cynicism around the ability of this space to deliver the outcomes that it needs to deliver. And I think perhaps these constructive ideas for how we might turn this space into an implementation vehicle have been, misinterpreted in that context as a criticism of the space. Ultimately, I think we all agree that it is absolutely essential for countries to cooperate to tackle the climate crisis. No one country can do this alone. And this is the only space that brings every country in the world together to do anything. And in this case, it's to address the greatest crisis of our generation. We know that 1,700 fossil fuel lobbyists are here at COP29. That is larger than most country delegations, except for 3 country delegations, including the host country delegations. Those interests are not here to drive ambition. In fact, they're here to take us backward. The UNFCCC needs a conflict of interest policy that puts a firewall between all things climate change, all things UNFCCC, and all things fossil fuels. And that conflict of interest policy needs to apply to the presidencies as much as it does to the delegates.
It is a big problem when the fossil fuel industry is involved in climate negotiations and in hosting the spaces where we have to deal with pushing ambition in this process. And therefore, all COPs, I must say, should be rid of vested interests, and therefore, one of the ways that can be done without undermining the larger work that we're trying to do here and all parties are trying to do here is to prevent corporate capture of these spaces and make sure that COPs are public funded instead of being funded by corporate money.
At that UN Climate Summit, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment has called for a total ban on fossil fuels. At an event at the COP29 meeting in Baku, the group urged member countries to join in the advocacy to stop the continued pollution of the planet. Our rights correspondent, Ovieteme George, takes a look at the effect greenhouse gas emissions is having on people in one community in the Niger Delta state of Bayelsa.
The bright light of flaring gas illuminates Gbanatoro whenever a well-testing exercise is carried out in the community. The paramount ruler of Ekwetiama Kingdom, King Bubaraye Dakolo, is drawing global attention to the plight of his people.
The entire world should know that this is what the communities that bear oil and gas in the Niger Delta, Gbarantoro Town, Ekwetiama Kingdom, Bayelsa State, the Niger Delta, suffer from. Shell, Chevron, Mobil, Elf, Ajip, and the rest of them will not attempt to do this in their countries. But here, they pretend like it doesn't matter. It matters. The flare is less than 150 meters from where we stand, and as close as about 50 meters from some houses behind me.
We walked close to the houses, few meters away, but could not go closer because of the unbearable heat from the blaze.
We are experiencing case of convulsion and miscarriage in this community. And look at it, the noise too is disturbing us. Look at the house, it's shaking. Even we too, the air we are inhaling is bad, it's contaminated. The water in the river, the rainwater too, everything is bad because of this gas flaring. Their own is to come and make their money and leave us alone.
They can lay pipe from here to the sea and load crude every day. But when they want to flare gas, they cannot lay pipe to the sea. Why? They should lay this pipe to elsewhere. They can flare the gas when the effects will be so minimal.
The periodic well testing exercise is not the only source of concern for the chairman of the Bayelsa State Traditional Rulers Council.
It is one of the most polluting flares in the whole universe because it's projected close to 60 or so meters off ground. So at the end of this exercise, people will die, birds will die, insects will die, and the world doesn't seem to know the price the oil-bearing communities of Bayelsa State pay for oil to be available for the federal government of Nigeria is untold.
Baratoru and neighboring communities always experience heavy rainfall. However, water from the rooftops can be likened to acid rain. The impact of carbon emissions is a subject of concern for the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. The association invites guests to the World Health Organization's pavilion at COP29 to discuss health costs and impactful intervention for fossil fuels.
Generally, the ads are being put out there by fossil fuel companies to hide the fact that they're not actually doing what they need to do, which is decrease production, decrease combustion of fossil fuels. If they can put out assertions like we will be net zero by 2050 without having to back that up by actual plans, it looks like they're doing something when they're actually not.
Countries like Nigeria, massive impacts, but massive impacts around the world. So we need to move forward. I've been working with the Secretary General to be clear about what large corporations need to do. When they say they're committed to climate change, they actually need to be reducing their emissions. They need to be scaling money to clean, and they need to be thinking about a just transition for workers and communities.
Nigerians at the meeting also lend their voices to the conversation.
Health impacts of fossil fuel extraction and usage in Nigeria is so well known because our people live the experience. They're living right in the middle of the crisis.
Very stricter measures of control and regulations be applied in order to mitigate this environmental genocide on the lives of our people. And this has to be treated with the urgency it requires today. That's the position of the Ijo Youth Council, and that's why we're here to propagate that message that we cannot kill our people on an alarming scale.
Ovietime George, Arise News.
The World Trade Organization is optimistic that Nigeria and other countries in Africa have the resources to produce green energy. Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, made a statement in an exclusive interview with Arise News correspondent Ovietime George on the sidelines of COP29 event in Baku, Azerbaijan, after panel discussions on enabling global trade in renewable hydrogen and derivative commodities. The president of Afrexim Bank, Professor Benedict Orama, shares Okonjo-Iweala's optimism about business opportunities in the African continent.
What we're arguing at WTO with all our partners is that on the African continent, we can turn our green comparative advantage to our use by producing green energy, but at the same time, linking it to the products, other products like critical minerals. We want to process cobalt in some countries. We want to process lithium. We want to process some other. We need energy. Why should we transport the energy somewhere? No. Or why should the critical minerals be transported out? No. We're telling businesses now to invest and process them in place all the way to manufacturing the batteries so we can create jobs, create value for our countries, create prosperity. We have to stop being commodity exporters. So Africa has what it takes, so does Nigeria.
We are also working under the coordination of the WTO and the IFC to build a coalition of multilateral development banks that are supporting value chains through supply chain financing. And for us in our Afrexim Bank, we are very interested and we are partnering in this because we want to grow regional value chains And to do that, we need to make sure that we embed factoring and reverse factoring, all those supply chain products that are required.
Well, I think that's very important that Afreximbank president there is talking about building our regional value chain. The most important thing, particularly when you go to these climate conferences, when people talk about this energy transition that the global north is focusing on, is that in the global south and in Nigeria, we have the largest proven reserves of gas on the continent. And those are these transition fuels. That's where you have the CNG, the LPG, the LNG. These are the green, CNG being described as a green fuel in terms of a source of both income for Nigeria, but also possibly for reorganizing our economy. Yeah. And so I think when I understand and I agree with Ovieteme George earlier in that when he said that Azerbaijan used their oil to build Baku. So from them, it's a gift from God. So even if they want to be friendly to the environment and not use plastic, we cannot leave our fossil fuels. And that's similar to what Mr. Kola Karim said in my interview with him, who's the chairman of Shoreline Group. And it's just like the global north, the west, they contribute 97% to global emissions. They used it to fuel their own industrial revolutions. They had the first one, the second one, third one, and now they're saying, oh, we can't. But we haven't even matched you in development, and we definitely don't match you in the emissions. So we must fuel our economies with our own fuel, but also make sure that we are also transitioning, well, not with them, but it has to be equitable transition. We must fund it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're very correct. And for me, I see some sense in what the Azerbaijan president said about oil and gas being a gift from God, because it's a message to the global north that we are not where you were when you took advantage of fossil fuel, and now that you have gotten to a particular stage, you are now trying to apply the same rules to everybody, including those who are still trying to come up in the ladder of development. And I think that that in a way can be likened to what Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu said when he was still the candidate campaigning to be president, specifically in Kano. If you remember, there was a question, put to him, and then he used the allegory of the church rat and the poison, chalice, Holy Communion, he said. And I think that the point that he was trying to raise at that time, is similar to what the Azerbaijan president is now saying today, that yes, we will negotiate. Yes, we understand the need, to have, greener emissions. But then this, in a way, is also a gift that we need, like you did, to use to develop, to a certain point. But like you said, there are ways that we can, proceed so that we don't just, every year in, year out, go there and say the same thing. So for me, I think that part of what the president and his team should be doing will be to take a cue from what he said 2 years ago in Kano, and then ensure that the ministers who we don't know which one was in Baku, we don't know which one was in Dubai, to look at it closely, and then look at the countries, with which we are almost at the same pace, OPEC members too, and see how we can develop at our own pace without necessarily appearing to go against what the world is saying. But in any case, it looks like there will be a kind of a breather in the next 4 years, given that Trump, is in, and Argentina is also saying that maybe like America, we want to take a second look. Okay, America, maybe not America, maybe Trump. That we want to take a second look at this whole noise about the environment and the way to approach it. We will see what happens.
I honestly think for me, though, and apart from us also saying we need to develop ourselves, I think it's very frightening if the countries like America, who actually put out more greenhouse gases, who have mostly contributed to these climate shocks, if they pull out from the Paris Agreement, like Trump said he wanted to do, if they damage these agreements, if other countries follow up, we are going to suffer more in Nigeria. Right now we're in harvest season and we still have month-to-month inflation, food inflation of over 2%, because our harvesting is reduced because of insecurity and climate shocks, because of flooding, because of seedlings that cannot handle the extreme weather conditions that this climate change is about. And the issue for me is that countries in the global south, Nigeria, countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we are suffering more from these global shocks, from our lack of food, the value chain, our food value chain being affected in hugely detrimental ways by climate change. And so if America or Argentina or Germany or India, these countries that are further developed, if they decide that, you know what, we're going to take off the guardrails and we're going to continue increasing, the global temperature, we do not care about global warming, we do not care about our emissions, we are going to suffer more from it.
Yeah, it's a question of what we have to do about it, because what is
so we need to
certain,
keep going to these things and keeping pressure on them that they need to, because even if America said it was even going to match our emissions, they would even have to reduce it more than they want to reduce it now. Because we don't, I think that New York might have more emissions than the whole of Nigeria.
Absolutely.
So I find it worrying when they say, okay, whatever, like, let me take off the guardrails, let's throw away the Paris Accords. Because for me, I'm just looking at what desertification in the north, I'm looking at the flooding, and I'm looking at our food vulnerabilities in Nigeria, and I'm like, I need you in the west to behave yourselves.
Yeah, what this says to me is that the discussions around it, should be continuous.
Definitely.
And it shouldn't be a one-way discussion, so that we don't keep on listening to the same old thing that we are listening to. So if there are other thoughts, other school of thoughts that are saying that let us look at it in a particular way, maybe that will be helpful, without necessarily acceding to the excesses that pulling out of the Paris Accord, will bring. But we'll see how it goes.
Now, the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and President Joe Biden have discussed Ukraine and the Middle East on Wednesday in a cordial meeting designed to demonstrate a smooth transition of power despite deep disagreements over policy. The two American leaders sat side by side before a roaring fire in the White House Oval Office, a peaceful scene that buried tensions between them. Biden argued for support for Ukraine and that it was good for U.S. national security because a strong and stable Europe would keep America from being dragged into war. Trump has pledged to end the Russia-Ukraine war quickly without saying how. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says Biden and Trump had a substantive meeting for about 2 hours.
So today, President Biden met with President-elect Trump for approximately 2 hours in the Oval Office. White House Chief of Staff Jeff Zients and incoming Chief of Staff Susie Wiles joined the meeting. It was a substantive meeting, an exchange of views. They discussed important national security and domestic policy issues facing the nation and the world. President Biden also raised important items on Congress's to-do list for the lame duck session, including funding the government and providing the disaster supplemental funding the president requested. Finally, the president reiterated what he said to the president-elect the day after the election and to the American people in a Rose Garden just last week. We will have an orderly transition and a peaceful transition of power. He wanted you all to know that the president-elect, again, was gracious, came with a detailed set of questions. It was, again, substantive. But I do want to take a little bit of a step back here because it's really important to note, and you're going to hear me continuing to say this over and over again, the importance of having a smooth transition, and importance of having an orderly transition. The president respects the will of the American people and wants to make sure that occurs. That is what he believes the American people deserve. And so that is as far as I can go. That is what I am sharing with you from the president directly. I will say that the president certainly looked forward to the meeting, appreciated the conversation, and answered any questions that the president-elect had, offered up his thoughts, but I'm not going to go any further than that. They met for more than 2 hours. They met for a very long time, or nearly 2 hours, pardon me. And I think by the length of the meeting tells you that they had an in-depth conversation on an array of issues. And so, look, the president reached out to the president-elect wanting to make sure that he gave an opportunity to the president-elect, afforded him that opportunity to have a meeting with him to talk about the different issues that matter to the American people. But nearly 2 hours says a lot about how the meeting went. I'm not going to go into details of what was on the list. I shared that, and the president wanted you all to know that because we want to be very clear. It was actually a substantive meeting, nearly 2 hours. There was a lot discussed. There was a lot of back and forth. And I'm not going to go into specifics. I think if the president-elect wants to share his set of questions to President Biden, he certainly can and will if he chooses. But wanted to give you as much information as I could without going into too much specifics on a private conversation.
In the meantime, President-elect Donald Trump on Tuesday said Elon Musk and former GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy will lead the new Department of Government Efficiency, which is not, despite the name, a government agency. The acronym DOGE is a nod to Musk's favorite cryptocurrency, Dogecoin. Trump said in a statement that Musk and Ramaswamy will work from outside the government to offer the White House advice and guidance, and will partner with the Office of Management and Budget to drive large-scale structural reform and create an entrepreneurial approach to government never seen before. He added that the move will shock government systems.
You know, you show what matters by your actions, not your words. And my actions are: I'm here, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I'm here for a very important reason. Which is. I can't emphasize enough that Pennsylvania is, I think, the linchpin in this election. And this election, I think, is going to decide the fate of America, and along with the fate of America, the fate of Western civilization.
I think as a nation, we are really still just a little young, actually. And I think we can still be a nation in our ascent. So on one hand, I'm not going to be the person who tells you it's morning in America, because it's not. But I think it can be. And I think it's going to take a leader who both sees the present hour for what it is. The hour is late, but it's not done yet. And I think with that, I do think that our nation's best days for the next generation can still be ahead of us.
I think right now, if we're meaningfully above where the mainstream media narrative has us polling or otherwise, if we score in the double digits, I think we're well on our way to success, and I think that we are absolutely going to achieve that. And I think that there's plenty of room for a top 3, top 2, or even a top 1 finish.
All right. 2 important developments there from the US of A, where DJ Trump has returned to power. I think the first part of the story is that we took, the meeting with President Joe Biden is an important story, given the tradition that it follows, given, of course, that 4 years ago, this was what Trump failed to do in keeping with the tradition. He did it with Obama, together with his wife.
Obama did it for him.
Obama did it for him. I noticed, of course, this year that Mrs. Trump, Melania, was not able to honor the invitation from Dr. Jill Biden. But the fact that Trump spent close to 2 hours from the report with the incumbent President Biden, I think that's remarkable. I see that the body language was cordial, and I like the fact that Biden emphasized the sort of continuity that he would like him to do, particularly in the issue of concerning the issue of Russia and Ukraine. Everybody knows President Biden's interest in Ukraine. For me, I think that that's a good American tradition that countries like Nigeria should pick a thing or two from. If a president is leaving, wouldn't it be nice to, especially when it's the incoming is from another party, wouldn't it be nice that you're taking them round Aso Rock, together with their spouses, and say, this is how it works there, and things like that. But then at a situation where you have, it's likely that the other party will have gone to court while they're still fighting it out. So, but I think that this is something to learn from, and I like the fact that at least for this year, that tradition has been maintained.
Definitely. I think for me, what has been the biggest story coming out of America is Donald Trump's appointments. Now, for the Attorney General, he has nominated Matt Gaetz, who is a Florida congressman. Matt Gaetz famously only has 2 years of private practice experience. I think he has less court experience than I do, so I think I could be the next Attorney General. Or even, I think I could be nominated to head the defense.
It's just that you've not been a lawmaker.
Yeah,
he has been.
I mean, he has been, and he was known for, particularly for pushing stand your ground laws, which, as we remember, that is how Trayvon Martin was killed. That is how George Zimmerman got off. And so we're looking forward to see what type of cases the Department of Justice under Mike Gates would be prosecuting, a department that also investigated him for alleged sex trafficking and sexual misconduct with a minor. So, that would be interesting to see. We also have a Fox News anchor, Hepseth, being nominated to head up defense, to head up the Pentagon, to head up one of the biggest militaries, if not the biggest military in the world. And Trump's first nominee, Mattis, was a 4-star general. However, now we have a major who has been called an extremist by his own army and who believes that American soldiers should be able to commit war crimes and get away with it.
Well,
according to his book, he says they should rewrite the rules of engagement. And furthermore, we have what a lot of people saw coming, who is Robert Kennedy as the head of
this health secretary.
Definitely, and beyond being in charge of the FDA, the Center for, and the CDC, Center for Disease Control, this is also a man who believes in full-term abortion rights and also does not believe any vaccines are safe, and has also said that he would not fund treatments for diseases.
I think what he said is that
he said there are no vaccines that are safe.
That people should be allowed to have a choice.
No, he said there are no vaccines that are safe.
I think he clarified that people should be allowed to have a choice whether to take vaccines or not. But for me, what is important is to allow the president-elect to pick his team. He's not a rookie in government. He was there for 4 years. He must have learned a few things. And now that he's coming back, first thing to note is that this is a system that works. You do not have to wait for months after you've been sworn in before you pick your team. Definitely. Now he's picking his team, so people are looking at the quality, like you're doing, of the team. I like what he has done with, for example, with Elon Musk and Vivek, creating an office for them outside of government, but to reduce, to increase government efficiency, reduce waste and things like that. People might say, what is Elon Musk doing that? It's like saying that what is a powerful former governor in another political party doing in a present governor and holding an important ministerial position. People will have to reward, in a way, loyalty. And you just have to, and I think that we should reduce the tension, given the fact that those who didn't want him to be president shouldn't have the liberty to dictate to him who to pick as his team.
Would you compare the Elon Musk appointments to, let's say, if they gave Dangote the rights to a department to head the NNPC, the NUPRC, and all our other oil things? Because it is a billionaire having regulatory chance over.
If Dangote played a role in the government, winning an election, I don't see that I don't see any law that has been broken. But of course, there could be moral issues that will be looked at. But again, I said that Trump will not run America like Obama or Biden. The institutions are there to call him to order if he, if he misses the track. That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
We'll see how it all goes.
We'll see how it goes.